Thank you for so many important ideas. By hearing this, my opinions can summed up in the following question. How can a holistic approach be successful? There was a lot that I agree with and can build upon and take forward. Thank you very much. I was particularly pleased that you quoted Robin Wall Kimmerer. In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, she describes the mismatch between a scientific and a religious perspective. The one seems to be incompatible with the other, but the opposite is actually the case. Elisabeth Naurat's plea to overcome a one-sided approach is basically what has been recurring in the European humanities tradition since the Romantic period at the latest. Wall Kimmerer's approach of understanding biology and religion not as opposites, but as complementary is therefore to be welcomed. In my opinion, other cultures, such as the Latin American tradition of Buen Vivir, are a step further in this respect, and we can learn a lot from liberation theology. Joanna Macy theology with a Buddhist perspective also provides important insights here. This brings us to mutual learning. I was assumed to see that Mrs. Naurat thinks that the eco-theological turn is better developed in Catholic theology. For a long time, I held the opposite view, namely that eco-theology was more developed in Protestant theology. However, I have since moved away from this competitive thinking. I believe this is time to emphasize the common ground and shared understanding across denominations and religions. The Catholic tradition of the bouquet of herbs on the Feast of the Assumption is just as important and relevant as, for example, the rituals around the Feast of Nowruz or the many rituals of Thanksgiving for the harvest. It is precisely through such religious practices that the connectedness that Mrs. Naurat rightly calls for is practiced. I would like to add a few reflections to Mrs. Naurat. First point, gratitude and retinity. In Christian theological discussion, the term retinity and gratuity have been introduced as principles of social ethics alongside connectedness. Retinity, from the Latin retenet, refers to the interconnectedness of all things and people. The principle of gratuity is the less known. It describes the fact that something is done or given for free. This attitude comes from the experience of having received something for nothing. In the context of Matthew 10:8b, gratuitousness means giving without personal gain. Everyone should have areas in their life where something is given free of charge. In education for sustainable development, the attitudes of kinship and gratuitousness offer an opportunity to bridge the gap between knowledge and action. Second point, the importance of religious education for sustainable development. Drawing upon many years of experience, I can say that there has been at least some movement in this area in recent years. When I submitted my doctoral thesis on this topic over 20 years ago, I faced many hurdles, especially as a woman. A holistic, interdisciplinary approach was viewed with skepticism at that time. Fortunately, after more than 20 years, we are one step further, and the interdenominational and interface RESD working group has been meeting regularly since 2020 to promote mutual learning and exchange. This is an interface approach characterized by specific themes. It is united by the common goal of making the world a better place for all. From the outset, there is a relationship of trust that others think in a similar way, but from different perspectives. And it is this interweaving of perspectives that characterizes learning. Point 3. Whole Institution Approach, School of Transformation and Sustainability, STS. The importance of a holistic approach has long been recognized in the ESD debate. However, this still requires a great deal of work. UNESCO's call for a holistic approach in educational institutions is still a long way off, at least in universities. Now I would like to do a little advertising for myself. Along with Eberswalde and Leuphana, the KU Eichstätt-Ingolstadt is one of the few universities in Germany that consistently pursues a holistic approach. It is therefore important that sustainability is practiced in all fields of the university's activities. Not only research and teaching play important roles, but also the sustainable management of the campus. Is the food fair and regional? Is there waste separation? Is CO2 emissions recorded and minimized? Student involvement in sustainability in the Green Office is just as important as our administrative structures. How transparent are the university's processes? How can everyone be involved in decision-making? How can exclusion be avoided? The WAI addressed these questions. In my experience, many students and lecturers are not aware of this approach. In addition to the whole institution approach, last year the KU opened the School of Transformation and Sustainability. The aim of STS is to make religious education expertise more visible and better integrated into the university as a whole, and to adopt an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary perspective. Mutual learning is possible here, for example, between economists and theologians. Fourth point. Inter and transdisciplinary work at the university. I don't presume to speak for everyone, but I sometimes have the impression that religious education and practical theology have long since recognized the need for interdisciplinary cooperation. For practical theologians, working with climate scientists and integrating their expertise is a matter of course. At conferences with climate scientists, I sometimes take the liberty of asking the other way round. What do you need from theology? Where are you not making progress on your own? Often there is no answer. And so I have shared Mrs. Naura's thesis that theological discussions, such as the body-soul theories, can at least be considered, if not shared, by natural scientists. The following addition is possible. This is depending on time. We have time to, there's a small 5 sentences about that. Yeah, okay, great. A distinction must be made here between the so-called day and night sciences. The day sciences focus on what can be precisely measured and counted, showing empirical evidence. This is very important, but the night sciences are also important. They deal with the imponderable, the not really tangible. Scientists Martin Lercher and Italiana emphasize the importance of dialogue between the sciences and the humanities. The point is to stimulate new creative processes. In this sense, theology could also serve as an inspiration for creative processes in the field of creation narratives. Fifth point, transformation capacities. Take, for instance, the development of utopias or the ability to shape the future. Those who are able to imagine possible futures for different scenarios are less surprised by developments and therefore remain more capable of acting. The ability to act, in turn, leads to self-efficacy. And this is exactly what students need, giving the pessimistic outlook for the future. Transformative learning is set in motion when students engage in the experience of the real. When they experience for themselves that familiar thought patterns and answers no longer fit current challenges and questions. When this experience is available, they will search for appropriate answers and judgments themselves. On the one hand, this requires knowledge of the system. How can we describe the current? How did something come to be the way it is? On the other hand, you also need a sense of purpose. In other words, you need to know where you want to go. This is done in exchange with other actors. How do we want to make the world fit for the future? Finally, knowledge of transformation is also needed. How do we arrive at these new forms? Which actors need to be involved? What experiments need to be carried out? A new concept of learning at universities is also needed to help develop such knowledge. 6th point, a new concept of university learning. Our universities are generally not compatible with this new concept of learning. Again and again, I see students asking at the beginning of the semester which topic they should work on. Once they have it, they usually give an excellent lecture on it. But the rest of the time, they are not in class. We have developed a spiral of transformative learnings at STS. I introduced this yesterday. It has to do with practicing connectedness and compassion, but also systematic knowledge and complex thinking in all areas, not just religious education. In education, we interact with biology, geography, social science, and theology. Learning takes place in the areas of new thinking, new awareness, and new action. This is where the interreligiousness that Mrs. Naurath mentioned comes into play. It is exciting to learn how different religions and indigenous peoples live by examining, for example, the importance of plants. Are there similarities, for example, between the monastic medicine of Hildegard von Bingen and the experience of indigenous peoples with medicinal plants? How do I learn gratitude? And how do I learn to wait? A university garden, for example, is a good place to learn these things. Students can lend a hand and learn the value of planting, tending, letting things happen, being at the mercy of heat, drought or even floods. The aim is to bring biology, geography, and theology together in education. Only in this way can connectedness become the spiritual basis of an ESD, and that is not only religious. To illustrate this connection, I invite you to take part in a short exercise. Actually, I wanted to bring walnuts from our tree at home for each of you. But now you find a walnut. Now you have to imagine the nuts. No, I think you have a real nut. It's not necessary to imagine on it. Okay. Okay. Look closely at it. What does it look like? Feel the surface. Squeeze the shell a little. Feel how hard it is. Smell it. There is a huge tree inside this little nut. You decide. Do you crack the nut to get the delicious nut inside? Or do you take the nut home and plant it? If you do, and the seed sprouts, you will ideally feel this connection on the Congress for many years to come. This way, the connectedness we heard about from Mrs. Naurath can become real, and we can hopefully benefit from it for many years to come. Thank you.